Hello, everybody. This is Ron Garney, and I drew Spider-Man for Marvel Comics, and you're listening to the Amazing Spider Talk.
Too many who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. In 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The Amazing Spider-Talk. The Amazing Spider-Talk. Come swing through the air, sit back and prepare for the Amazing Spider-Talk.
Hello and welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk. My name is Dan Gvozden, and I'm the founder and editor of SuperiorSpiderTalk.com.
Yeah, and I'm Mark Ginocchio, founder of the Chasing Amazing blog, which still exists thanks to Dan's haranguing, and currently an editor at Superior Spider Talk.
Mark, I'm glad we're so full of energy because I think based on that intro, we probably just murdered our guest.
It's possible, but,
we drained the life force from him.
Succubus.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for a special Amazing Friends episode of Amazing Spider Talk. We hope you enjoy this podcast and that it provides an intelligent conversation between two fans and a creator as we hope to look at the Spider-Man comic universe in a bit of a bigger picture.
Yes, Dan, and for those out there who don't quite understand what they just heard in our bumper, today we're talking to none other than Ron Garney, the ongoing artist of Amazing Spider-Man during the mid-aughts. While Civil War was going on. We're going to talk to Ron about Civil War and Back in Black and the Iron Spider costume and Spider-Man versus Captain America, etc., etc. Lots of great, crazy moments in Spider-Man history, and Ron was at the pen, or the pencils, as you will, for all of them.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's quite a lengthy interview, so let's get right to it.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends, Iceman and Firestar.
All right, Dan. Well, as we said in the introduction, we have a very special guest here today. We have artist Ron Garney, who was on Amazing Spider-Man during a really interesting era that included the road to Civil War, the actual Civil War event, like the tie-in issues in Amazing Spider-Man, and then Back in Black before he left the book for one more day and everything that followed that. We won't get into that right now, but one of Ron's big accomplishments, of course, was also introducing the Iron Spider costume. He drew Spider-Man versus Captain America, Peter's taking off the mask and revealing himself as Spider-Man. A lot of huge pivotal moments in the character's history. Ron, thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And he's a master. He's a master of accents too.
I thought I knew Sean Connery while I was on. Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Who knew that Ron Garney was just Sean Connery's pen name?
Yeah. It's Garnery, Sharon Garnery.
Well, Ron, you've had a really long-standing career at Marvel. I think about more than 25 years at least. A lot of different characters that you worked on, and something we always like to ask our guest is, what was their introduction to Marvel Comics, whether it was as a kid, a teenager, in college. You didn't start reading the comics until you started drawing them, whatever. But I guess what was kind of that big bang moment for you when it came to Marvel?
Well, I read comics when I was little, and then I forgot all about them in lieu of sports and girls and music and, other distractions. And then I was working as a bartender at a fancy restaurant, and the other bartender I was working with had a comic book, and I was fresh out of college for about a year, and didn't know what I was going to do with my degree in graphic design, and so he had a comic behind the bar, and I picked it up, and it kind of came flooding back to me in that moment because it was a Secret Wars issue, and it had all the heroes and everything, fighting on that planetoid or whatever that the Beyonder put them on, and that was really the moment. I was like, kind of hit me between the eyes because I had forgotten about them for so many years. And I asked him where he got the comic. He said down the street at this little bookshop, and so I ran down there after work and just started picking up all these old comics, all the comics that were out and old ones, and I was kind of hooked. It was weird how hooked I got, how quickly. And I thought to myself, man, this is something I could maybe make a career out of, because I had a lot of the things involved in it that I always wanted to do. I was really interested in film and storytelling and photography and composition, and and the interesting thing about comics is that it incorporates a lot of that. So it was sort of all this stuff rolled into one, and for me, it was like just a kick to be able to sit and draw and make a little, my own little movie, even though it wasn't moving or anything. It was still sort of it was still storytelling. So that's sort of what got me really into it. And the rest is history. I entered the Marvel tryout contest, and I didn't win that. Mark Bagley won it, but it was a few years later that I got in. I found out Mike Zeck lived in the area. Lived at like 5 minutes from me, really, 9 minutes. And he happened to be the one who drew Secret Wars, and so it was really weird. So I called him up on the phone, and he agreed to let me send him some stuff. And he seemed to think I was pretty good, and he got me in the business. In 1989, he brought me to Marvel, so here I am.
Do you have a first memory of Spider-Man, or do you have a run on the book that is your favorite?
Back in the 70s, I read Spider-Man, in the late 60s, but, I can remember stuff as obscure as Spidey's super stories that, with the Electric Company and, these that came out here and there. But I lived in a very remote area, so I didn't have a lot of access to stuff other than what my mother would bring home or whatever, so I can remember that stuff. Remember a little bit of the Ditko stuff way back. But, that's my earliest memories of it because I was reading when I was so young. But then as, when I got into it again because I knew Mike, probably Craven's Last Hunt jumps out in my mind, how brilliant that was, and James Madison, and the mood and the storytelling and the, just the noir of it, I thought was brilliant.
So it sounds you came aboard Marvel in like the 1989, you said, and flash forward a couple of years, and you got your first credited work on Spider-Man. I think it was issues 416 and 417. It was the kind of the tails end of the Clone Saga with Ben Reilly and all that, and it was just like a fill-in situation for you. I mean, do you remember the circumstances behind you coming to those issues as the artist?
Are you saying my first credited Spider-Man work or my first credited work?
First credited Spider-Man work.
Yeah, because I had been in the business for a few years at that point.
Yeah.
How did I get that? Trying to remember. Well, I had done Spider-Man I was on Moon Knight was my very first regular title. The first thing I ever did was G.I. Joe, but then I did Moon Knight as a regular gig. Spider-Man was in that as a guest shot. I don't know if that is the same thing, but I got the Spider-Man offer after Captain America, I think. And I was in between doing Captain America and maybe Silver Surfer or something. I was sitting on my hands with nothing to do until Surfer was ready for me to jump on board. I think that's how it went. And that's I got a call from whoever the editor was at the time, maybe Tom DeFalco or somebody, and asked me if I would do a couple issues, and I said sure.
And this was like a pretty wacky time for Marvel too, because it was like right on the cusp of like Heroes Reborn, and bringing in like some of the Image guys again. I mean, when you were doing these issues, were you aware of some of the bigger things going on behind the scenes, or were you just kind of insulated from that?
No, well, I was already off Cap at that point.
Yeah, that's right, because you were with Mark Waid, right, on that?
Waid, and then we got the call that it was going back to the book was being taken over by Liefeld, and Jim Lee was doing the other books, and so there was a big stink about that. And then they offered me anything I wanted to do, and then asking me to stay with Marvel, and I'm trying to remember. So that's I already knew everything that was happening. I think I was already off Cap at that point.
Right.
And, so then I was offered, like I said I always wanted to be Surfer. I thought he was a cool character. And, but in between that, I was offered the Spider-Man thing. So I said, yeah, I would do a couple issues for Tom. I think Al Williamson was inking me on that. I think Tom might have written the script even. I don't really remember too much about it. It was so long ago.
So flash forward even further into the future when you were brought on as the regular artist for Amazing Spider-Man. Mark, in his introduction of you, said you kind of came onto the book in this kind of crazy time to come onto this book. How much of the upcoming events that you would be tackling were laid out for you before you became the regular artist?
Not a whole lot. I'm trying to remember. I remember, so I had been with DC for a couple of years, and then they came back, and that was the first thing they offered me was Spider-Man, which obviously I was really happy about. And I knew that he was going to have the Iron Spider suit, but I wasn't sure exactly the direction it was going to go. I mean, it was kind of, not a whole lot was laid bare to me. I mean, little bits here and there. Again, it was so long ago. It was a decade ago at this point. So I didn't know a whole ton, just that he was getting a new costume and that there was going to be this, conflict of moral interest with Iron Man and Cap, and so I knew a little bit, but I didn't know how big it was going to actually get. So,
and was there like a lot of communication between the Spider office, if you will, and then Marvel's like broader editorial group when it came to Civil War? I mean, I imagine that J. Michael Straczynski was probably at the retreats when these big, the event was getting mapped out. But
sure.
once the book was in motion, I mean, how much were you looped in on what Civil War was going on versus what you were going to be doing in ASM?
Well, Quesada had called me and asked me to do the Spider-Man gig. I mean, and he laid out a little bit of it, but they tend to, the artists are always working. It's like they used to include us in a lot of the retreats and things, and they stopped doing that because of, for a lot of reasons. But so we don't get to hear as much, maybe as we would like. Some guys would like it, some guys wouldn't care one way or another. But I didn't, I wasn't really privy to a whole lot of that. I mean, I kind of just knew the basics of it, what was going in, what was going to happen, so I wasn't there, so I can't really speak to much of that at the retreats or anything.
So when you set out to tackle a new character or a new title that you're going to take on, one of the things especially notable in your recent Daredevil run is you have a pretty adaptable style. And I guess I'm curious, where did you go for inspiration for your Spider-Man, and how did you finally land upon the look that you adopted for the book when you took it over?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. Adaptable style, I guess. I mean, I'm always, for me, I don't know. I just try to feel the character. When I did Surfer, I tried a different look for that. It was sort of Mobius based, but I wanted to look him to look very alien and not quite so human, because he is an alien, you know, and I wanted him to feel alien. And so that's basically how I approach every character, you know, and Daredevil included. And Spider-Man, it was with that book, I wanted to be able to draw Peter Parker with a real face, like a, you know, one that people would think, you know, would just identify Spider-Man with. I mean, he has a face, but, you know, I feel like when I drew Peter Parker, he had a real identity to his look, as opposed to anything very generic, you know. But you know, I just wanted to draw it well. I mean, and to be honest, perfectly frank, you know, I'd come off DC for a couple of years, and that was kind of a little bit of a mess there, because I had done JLA. I was offered Superman, and I went over there, and they kind of bait and switched, and I ended up doing JLA, which I didn't want to do, and then I did Pain of the Gods, and I was inking my own stuff, and you know, and I just felt like my drawing, for some whatever reasons, was suffering. And I, you know, with Spider-Man, when he came along, you know, I just wanted to draw, you know, put as much in as I could and make it believable and energetic, you know, and exciting. In the very first opening issue I did, you know, there's a chase scene with Spider-Man with a couple thugs in a car, like an old Monte Carlo or something, I think, and I really wanted it to feel real, you know, and that's I don't know, that's pretty much how I approached it. And if you look at the panels and the setup and the, you know, the storytelling I did, I'm pretty proud of that opening bit, you know, for what it's worth.
How much leeway were you given on that issue? Because it is a very visual issue. I could imagine you just kind of being given a kind of a carte blanche to kind of have fun with it.
Yeah, well, it was the introduction of the Iron Spider costume, you know. You know, Peter's standing on the ledge, and he looks down, he sees the car, and he jumps off, not sure if this thing's going to fly or not. And he spreads his arms out and has that webbing that gives him sort of wings or whatever. And he's able to soar onto the car and everything. So, I mean, I mean, they pretty much, I mean, I still had to work with Straczynski's script, you know, but I tried to break it apart a little bit from what he wrote and open it up somewhat so I could put in some more exciting visuals, you know. You know, the writers sometimes have a tough time seeing things visually, I think. And, you know, so that's what I try to do. I just try to open things up, make it look, you know, visually exciting and have it make sense.
Well, related to that issue, so obviously, you know, we keep talking about the Iron Spider suit. I mean, it really was a definitive visual change for Spider-Man in this era. So, I mean, how were you approached about the design for this suit? You know, what notes were you given by editorial or JMS? I mean, what was kind of the genesis of this costume and everything that came with it?
It was already designed. I mean, you know, I didn't really have a hand in designing. It was already designed. And I got the designs straight away when I started doing it. I'm trying to remember whose designs they were. It might have been Quesada himself. It might have been Joe. I don't know. You know, I think a lot of people think I designed it, but I actually didn't. Maybe Mike Turner did it. Again, unfortunately, it was a long time ago. I don't remember a lot. But, yeah, I think, you know, I was given the designs, and, you know, it always changes a little bit with each artistic style, like the way I draw physique or, you know, muscular frame. You know, I have to fit the costume around that myself. And, you know, so I tried to make it look attractive because I didn't find it particularly appealing at first. So, you know, I tried to give it some sense of, you know, make it look cool and whatever, and to have those other mechanical Doc Ock kind of arms, you know, legs pop out of his back. You know, it was an exercise in frustration at points trying to make that look cool and not clunky and clumsy. But, you know, it was pretty much there, you know, and it was just an adjustment figuring out how I was going to make it work, you know, so.
One of the things that I like about its introduction so much in that comic is that, like, it kind of reads and looks like some dork driving their first sports car. Like even just in like the body language of how he kind of awkwardly approaches it and then quickly masters it.
Sure.
I guess I'm curious about your method in regards to people's posing and how you arrive at the kind of body language that you have.
You mean with him being clumsy in it?
Well, I mean, just in general, your method. Do you use models? Is that just
no? I actually don't. I pretty much just feel it myself. I when you draw enough, you tend to act these characters out yourself in your head, and I'm sure if there was a hidden camera on me, I'd be surprised myself to see how much my body's actually moving when I'm drawing, just trying to feel the language and stuff. I put my head into the drawing, and how it would feel, like I put my own head into the body of the figure I'm drawing almost, and try to feel it, and I have a fairly deep background in physical things like jujitsu and weightlifting and martial arts and things. So, I kind of understand how muscles work and things like that. So I tend to, just try to draw the body language according to what what's going on inside the character's head and what the action, that's going on, or the context of the scene and things like that, and I just, sometimes, you'd have to trust your instincts. I think that's the biggest thing is, eventually you draw so much, you just develop these artistic instincts, and, and when it feels right, you stop and you let it go, but you have to work towards that, and you know when it works and when it doesn't. So,
sorry, you go, Dan.
Do you think your history with martial arts has kind of led you to seeking out or doing work on street level characters like Spider-Man and Daredevil?
I just like doing single characters. I don't know if like Surfer wasn't a street level character. I wouldn't say.
That's true.
Wouldn't say Cap is either. I just like single characters. I shine better on those because for the very reason I was just giving you actually, is I tend to put my head into the character and feel what I think that character visually should look like. I don't know. That's why I'm adaptable, I guess, is because I don't bring one style for, I try not to have an ego about it and force my style onto every character I come across. I try to let go of that and try to let the character dictate to me what it wants to be, and what it feels. And, so I leave my ego out of it, so that's pretty much it, so, every character, when they offered me Cap, I just felt it. I knew what visually, what it could feel like. And, and even with the jaw, the way the jaw would look. And a lot of people don't realize I actually designed, I didn't do the actual technical work, but I designed the Captain America logo with the shield shooting across the top of the book, and that was all stuff that just came to me, so out of inspiration, So it was kind of like that. It's like that with every single character I do. If I feel inspired by it, it just comes naturally.
Well, related to your history with Captain America, how much fun was it for you to do Spider-Man versus Captain America in one of those issues?
That was great. I really enjoyed it. I always feel like, like I love Cap and I love Spider-Man. It's funny. I mean, I didn't love Cap as much growing up as much as I loved Spider-Man, and then interestingly, my samples to get into Marvel were Captain America samples, but the samples I worked on for a few years to get good at samples were Spider-Man samples. Stuff like Mary Jane and Peter Parker just sitting on a couch, in front of a fireplace, just relaxed scenes, and then him swinging around the city, just all those kinds of things. But what was your question?
No, the Spider-Man Captain America fight I forget the exact number. I mean, it's just a lot of fun to read. And then when you years later see Civil War in the theaters, I mean, I think it looks like they borrowed some visual notes from it. I mean, like at least like I just reread the issue recently. I felt like there were some similarities. Maybe I'm overreading. I don't know, but
no, I think they definitely strip mine a lot of that stuff. I was looking for it myself, but I think it was just where they were on that tarmac and everything was a little distracting. So, a giant man in the background and all that. I wasn't able to pick up as much as I'd like to see it again for that reason, to see if I could, pick up. But I felt some familiarity there too. I think it's all sort of thrown in the soup, and then you have a different, a soup with its own flavor at the end of it with, some things thrown in. But yeah, I was aghast to draw it. Again, I wanted the choreography to make sense, and I was never really sold on the idea that Cap could beat Spider-Man so easily. I mean, even though Cap is enhanced and he has a super soldier serum, I mean, for me, I'm being perfectly honest when I say a guy with the speed and agility and reflexes of a spider who can sense things coming before they actually, a punch coming before it happens, I feel like even somebody like Cap isn't going to be able to touch him. But I like the way Straczynski sort of played it in that, it's Cap's years of combat training that really gives him the edge. It's not so much his actual abilities or his enhancement, but his combat knowledge, and I think that's, his experience is what gave him the edge. But other than that, I feel like Spider would wipe the floor. Spider-Man can lift, 10 tons or something, and Cap can lift like a ton, or, I mean, I don't think people realize if we were talking realism here, the difference between 10 tons and 1 or 2 tons. So, I just feel like it wouldn't be as much of a contest as people think, but who knows?
Well, in the movie, he does catch Winter Soldier's punch without even thinking about it.
Right. Winter Soldier's kind of like, that was a great spot, where, Peter looks at it all quizzically, and makes some comment, and the Winter Soldier's kind of like, what the hell, So that's about it, though. It's like I love that. That's the thing I always loved about old Marvel comics is just when these characters get to meet for the first time on the street, and you want to know who's going to kick whose butt, and how awestruck the other awesome character is over, like, if Spider-Man runs into Daredevil or Submariner or whatever, how awestruck the Submariner would be at Spider-Man's abilities. Those are the things that I always got a kick out of, and pitting these guys against each other and see, who would come out on top through their wits and their intelligence and their abilities. It was always fascinating to me. So I think that's kind of why I got hooked back into it right away, even, in Secret Wars, because in Secret Wars here, they were all on a planet. It's every, fanboy's dream, all these little action figures pitted against each other. Sort of the Beyonder treated them like action figures, like a little kid. And then there was Spider-Man in the background who kind of had this edge on, it was just, I just liked the way that character Spider-Man always seemed to have an edge on everyone. And, somehow, I don't know. Always liked him for that reason. Like I always pictured Spider-Man taking on the Hulk and doing pretty well, just because of how fast he is and how he's so untouchable. We all want to be a character that nobody can touch, And here's a character who, can sense things coming, before they happen. So how are you going to touch him, So I don't know.
Well, he did beat Firelord in that one issue.
That's so awesome, it's great. Spider-Man is a badass.
Well,
the teenage kid, he's like, that's what's so great. Iron Man, in the movie, Tony Stark's awestruck with him, and I love the scene where he's in his room and he pulls up that screen and he shows Peter Parker catching a car and and just gently putting it down, and Iron Man, being sort of awestruck by this kid, and it's really cool. So
yeah. Well, speaking of other big moments, Steve McNiven got to do the big grand reveal of Spidey.
Yeah, that was a little not miffed, but I thought it was funny how, my last page shows him about to take the mask off, but the actual unveiling came in Steve's issue. And then in the next issue, Spider-Man shows him standing there without the mask on. So I would love to have been the guy who actually, had the unmasking.
Well, you did get to do it in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. So, what was it like to draw that moment? What did you think about it going into it?
Wow. I didn't know what to think. I was like, how is this going to, you always wonder how it's going to play out. Is there even a point to him wearing it anymore? So, there's always ramifications. How's J. Jonah Jameson going to take it? And, all these things kind of enter your brain. But yeah, all those things just sort of cross your mind, but you just draw it and then see what the effects are later. And then one more day happens.
Yeah.
None of it matters.
And then weirdly enough, that moment was one of only 2 moments where you got to do the red and blue suit during your time on the book.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, after that, well, no, there was. I think Back in Black, for opening parts of that, he was in the red and blue suit, and then he gets pissed about Ant-Man, goes and finds the Venom suit. He had hidden it on a building somewhere. So,
like you do.
The longest lasting webbing of all time.
Exactly. Right. Well, his webbing dissipated at that point, or was it permanent?
I think it was dissipated after an hour, but we'll let it go.
It was still like that. It was still okay.
No prize.
Better than I would.
Just a process question for you, Ron. I've read that you do about a page a day.
You read such insanity.
I don't know, Dan. Where do we read that?
I've read it in like at least an interview or two. Is that not true?
Yeah. I would say it may average out to about that. It just depends on what's on the page because, if that were the case, I'd be doing 365 pages a year, and I'd be, swimming in moolah, I suppose. Life happens and things happen. So, sometimes, today I had to pick up my son from basketball camp and he wants to go to the park or go get an ice cream. Things happen. I have to be a dad first and other things. I had a jiu-jitsu school that I owned for 5 years, 6 years, and I would teach jiu-jitsu and, sometimes I'm not as prolific as I'd like to be, but when I sit down and I don't have any distractions, I could probably do about a page a day. Yeah. That's being totally honest. During the Spider-Man run, I was working on I Am Legend in the movie. And so I would go to New York. I don't even know how the hell I did it. I was going to New York during the week, coming home at night and working on Spider-Man and on the weekends and working on that movie all at the same time. And I look back and I just think I must have been crazy. I don't know how I did it. So,
and you did the covers as well. That was not handed off to someone.
No, I wanted to do all of it. I wanted to do the covers. I don't like, only if I have to. I don't like handing off covers. I want the book to be me, and I get really aggravated when I have to even put fill-ins in now. Now everything is. Oh, we gotta get, the schedule this, schedule that. We need fill-ins. We need 8 pages done by this guy. Blah, 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 blah. It's not like the old days where I could do, 10-ish straight issues or whatever, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's nobody's fault, It's just, but I can't, I really, like even on Daredevil, the fact that there's these fill-in issues, like, I was plugging along pretty good into the first 5 issues, but then, they wanted me to do the point 1 issue, and then we got to do these covers right in the middle of your momentum, in the middle of an issue, and and before you know it, then the holidays come, and you have to spend time with the family, and before you know it, you're behind the 8 ball, or the scripts weren't in, or there's always reasons, but it's frustrating because I would like to do straight through, a whole year's worth or what have you without that being interrupted, because I feel like it waters down my legacy on it, Thankfully, with Spider-Man, I got to do a lot. I think I did 11 or 12 issues straight, or maybe with one or two fill-ins, one fill-in. So I was pretty happy about that. Now look at Mark Bagley, Jeez.
Well, I don't think anybody works faster than him. That's just like
sure. He's very I've talked with him about it. We're both fairly disciplined about it. I mean, he's probably, I don't know if he had the other things going on like I had with the martial arts and stuff with him, but I know he gets up at 7:00 every day and works till 7 at night. And for me, it was more like an 8 to 5 or 6. 8 to 5, and then I'd work out or do whatever, and then maybe try to get in some time at night. But, as you get older, it gets harder and harder. It's hard to sit. It's harder and harder to sit. It's not healthy either, I mean, part of the reason I don't do that is because it's not healthy. I just don't want to sit. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your mind, I mean, you become a lifeless husk. The life force being sucked into the pages. So I choose not to do that.
That's okay, because we feed on that stuff.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Open your mouths, and the life force just comes into you from the stuff we put into the pages.
That sounds way worse coming from you.
You guys don't even read. You just hold the books over your face, and then white light shoots out of the pages into your mouths. Succubuses, you comic book fans are succubuses draining our life forces.
Can I commission you to draw this scenario?
Well, it's kind of what it looks like you're doing in your profile pic here. It's like the light's going in through the megaphone, sucking the life force of creators away. Give me more, and then when it's not. And then when the drawing isn't as good that month or the writing isn't as good that month, you guys get so mad because the life force didn't taste as sweet this month. You son of a you inconsistent bastards. Get with the program and stop being a hack and give me more of your delicious life force.
Ron, I have to say, I love your Ron's bad reviews thing you do on Twitter.
You saw that?
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to do the next one. I'm going to do is a retro. Volume 2 is going to be a retro one of one. I'll find an old one, and I'm going to go through that because it just cracked me up when I read some of the things these guys write. They're just so indignant about it if they don't like it. It's just hilarious. How dare you not be as good as Jason Latour, you son of a bitch.
Well, in the vein of sucking the life force out of things, I'm gonna try and transition to Dan. So we'll see how I do.
We're running the gamut of things here.
Back in Black. So, one thing I always remember when I was picking up the book at that time, it was like the whole thing coincided with the release of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, which is obviously marketed very heavily around the black costume. So, with that,
that's actually on my television right this second. Sandman is walking down the street, and sand's coming out of his ear right now. Police
I just did it for my daughter. So I guess, talking of kind of larger forces dictating where things are going in comics. I mean, how much of Back in Black was actually originally visually designed to be like a nod to the movie? I mean, we see this a lot, obviously. Spider-Man fights Electro in the movie, and he has an Electro story that month. So, I mean, was it did the editors at Marvel kind of sit down and be like, all right, he's going to be in the black costume in the movie. We got to do a black costume story. Figure it out.
I don't know if that one was as much. I think that might have been just more serendipitous than actual real conscious effort. as I recall. But there have been, like with Daredevil, it definitely was a push to make it dark again to reflect the television series. But with the Back in Black, run, I don't know if it was as deliberate as much as it was just favorable timing, or unfavorable, depending on your point of view. So yeah, it's interesting about that is, I always have to bring this up, I guess. The Kingpin story was actually my story. I actually wrote that to Axel in an email, and it got used. So that was fun for me.
Well, anybody that went and saw the Spider-Man 3 movie and then picked up this book was in for a real shock. Because Spider-Man was a wholly violent, character, unlike he had been for quite a while. To that point, you mentioned Kraven's Last Hunt earlier. Many issues of this, to me at least, are reminiscent of Kraven's Last Hunt. There's a scene in the sewer where there's rats crawling all over one of the men that Spider-Man is torturing. Did you reach back to that series to find inspiration for this dark chapter of Spider-Man's life?
Yeah, I wouldn't say reach back, but it was definitely on my mind while I was drawing it, for sure. And when I'm trying to think if I actually pulled that book out or not. I might have. I don't know. I don't know if I did. I tend not to do that. I try not to look at other guys' work, even sometimes. Obviously I have my influences and things like that, but I try not to deliberately draw from someone else's stuff, let it just come out on its own. But I probably did. Again, I don't remember, but I do remember it being on my mind in that scene in particular where he's hanging upside down, and thinking that it had that Kraven's Last Hunt feel to it, for sure.
Now, obviously, that fight with the Kingpin, and I didn't realize that this was your pitch.
That's the bit I actually came up with in my email to Axel, was that was the story. I said, hey guys, what if the Kingpin, Peter just gets the shit beat. The Kingpin gets the shit beat out of him by Peter. Because if it were me, because this alludes back to what I was saying to you before about Spider-Man being so unbeatable. I made the point that if Spider-Man actually fought the Kingpin, he could crush him instantly. I always make, that's the point I was making to you guys before. It's like with Captain America even. This is a guy who, so there wouldn't even be a contest. So what if Spider-Man, what if Spider-Man just snuck into prison, just beat the absolute crap out of Kingpin in the prison in front of all the inmates, and it ruined Kingpin's reputation. He's no longer a badass because he got his ass kicked in front of because that's a big deal for people. Especially males, for the most part, once you get beaten, it's like people don't, and I know this from being in martial arts, in particular, like in jiu-jitsu, if you get tapped by somebody, when you're a higher belt and, nobody can tap you out, you have this mystique about you that everybody wants to learn from you. Everybody wants to, know your secrets and, but then once you get tapped out by someone, or, that person no longer has, that as much of an interest because they reached that goal. And it's kind of like that in general. And I always thought, in fights in general, and I always thought that, what would happen if Kingpin lost all that to Peter, And I said, it could give rise to one of the inmates, could become a character down the road. I don't know if they ever did that. After he saw what happened to the Kingpin, and so he thinks he can take on the Kingpin, one of these inmates or whatever. But anyways, that's where that all started. So.
And was there once you got the green light to do this story, in terms of how you kind of blocked it out visually, what were you looking to achieve with that? This besides,
just the anger, I wanted to take out Peter's, Straczynski did too. I mean, interestingly, I've never spoken to Straczynski. Not once on the whole run did I get an email from him or anything, but never spoken to the guy. But he had similar, just judging from what I was reading, he had similar ideas, and it's like at some point, you can only, like, Spider-Man's known for his quips, and he's always trying to keep a sense of humor during fighting, but, once his aunt gets shot, it's like all that goes out the window, and he becomes a really dark character, and that's really kind of what I wanted to stress, when he goes in to beat the crap out of the Kingpin, is like he is, this is somebody who's, had enough, and he's going to just decimate this motherfucker, excuse my French. This motherfucker out. So that's pretty much what I wanted to convey. A lot of angst and anger, and take him right out of that normal. If he's going to be a real character at all, he's going to have that side to him no matter what. We all do. That dark side just came out. So.
Well, speaking of Aunt May getting shot, you have this great sequence with these crosshairs. It's a really tense build up to the moment where she kind of gets caught in the crossfire. Can you talk about, I guess, constructing that scene, and then the moment itself? What were you thinking in terms of what you did want to do and didn't want to do with that moment?
Oh boy, God, it's trying to get me back in that moment, drawing that page. Those pages. If I had them in front of me, it'd be easier, because when you draw pages, you tend to remember exactly what you were thinking and feeling at the time. But it's tough to say. I mean, I remember the crosshairs. I think Mary Jane was kind of looking out the window, was she?
Yeah.
And then what? Do you guys have that in front of you by any chance?
I can get it.
You don't have to. But I'm just trying to remember the sequence of events and what panels were there, and before she gets shot. I know at the end of the issue, she kind of looks, and she's got a big red blotch on her gown, and it's hard for me to remember what I was thinking or trying to achieve at that moment, other than just make it, pull it off, make it look believable. And so I remember going to this area. Next town over, this motel. I took that motel. I did do a location shoot for that. I kind of went to a motel and was looking at how what it would look like, from a building across the street, that kind of thing. But that's about all I can remember.
Now, Ron, when Back in Black wrapped up, was there ever talk about you doing art on One More Day, or like how was that whole thing broached? Because I know Quesada ended up doing it, but were you going to be involved at any point, or? No,
I think Quesada wanted that to himself. I mean, I don't know. All I know is that I don't remember how I knew or how I got told, but just that he was going to draw that. And then what did I do after that? I don't even know what I did after that, to be honest with you. What did I do after Spider-Man? Do you guys know?
Well, I was going to ask. I was also going to ask if you.
I've done so much stuff in my career; it just swims around in my head. I'm trying to put it all into place. I can't even remember what I did after Spider-Man. It was Wolverine, Weapon, Get Mystique, I think.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. And man, I really had a ball with that. I really did. That was one of my favorite things I've ever done.
Was that Jason Aaron, or?
Yeah, it was. And I decided to go to enhanced pencils, and I changed my style up again for that. And, and I really had a ball on it. It felt like artistically and storytelling wise, I brought myself up for that one. So. Well,
I mean, considering that after One More Day, Spider-Man went to this, triple shipping, rotating creators thing. I mean, were you ever offered a spot in like the rotating cast of artists, or I mean,
no, it was never. That was it. I mean, I think I do think there was this tendency to view my work as sort of old schoolish. I'm able to do any school, to be honest with you. I think, but I think there were other guys that they were talking about after Casada. Maybe was it Marcos Martin? Maybe. Mm-hmm. So was he on after that?
Yeah, briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was the guy. And he's a great talent. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. So I think, I think they were looking for something fresh and a little bit less old school than my stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of got that feeling about it, but it's just speculation, But no, I was never offered again, It's not to say I wouldn't want to do Spider-Man again because, as time goes on, you tend to. Sometimes I want to revisit old characters to try to upgrade how I would draw them.
If you were to get another stint with Spider-Man, I mean, do you think you would be able to put a new spin on it, pardon the pun, in the same vein of like what you've done with Daredevil? Or, would you try to go back to the well, what you did 10 years ago?
No, I wouldn't go back to the well. I wouldn't do that. I would probably try something different. And looking back at some of my old sketches of him, when I was about to start, there's a dramatic difference in the way I was drawing him just in a sketchbook. He was very spidery looking, and very animated, and you'd have to see what I was doing there to understand. A lot of why it became what it became too was I had Bill Reinhold inking me, and he was very heavy inker, great artist, himself. So it definitely lended to that. And I had worked with him on Green Arrow for DC in a couple of issues, and he's just a real professional and really, really good artist. So I was lucky to have him, but it definitely added to it, made its own animal. Like I was saying, if you looked at my sketches, it would have been a little different had I inked them myself. So I would definitely do something a little different. I wouldn't go back to well, and I would change because I look back at this stuff and all I see are the things I could have done better. And I was under I was trying to do a good job and yet be good with the schedule. At that time, I was just coming back to Marvel. I'd had a falling out with Marvel earlier for a couple of years earlier, and they came back and we made amends and. So I wanted to do a good job, and so I was really churning the stuff out. I mean, like we said, it was like 12 issues straight, or maybe with a fill-in, I think. Can't remember exactly, but so I did a lot of work. So now I would definitely approach it differently. I would like to at least do 3 issues or something again of some story at some point. Or if not more,
Well, we would love to see it, but our final.
There's just so many great artists now. It's hard to, and I think is Dan Slott still writing that?
He is.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got a death grip on it.
Yeah. It's funny, watching him evolve into what he's evolved. I mean, he started out in the art returns department at Marvel, and now he's this big famous writer. It's great to see, I guess. He's got a lot of talent that he can pick from. So
Well, our final question we like to ask everybody that comes on our show is, what does it mean to you personally that you were an ongoing artist or someone that got to contribute to Amazing Spider-Man and the world of Spider-Man?
What does it mean to me that I got to contribute?
Yeah, like personally. Like, what does that mean to you?
It's great. I mean, it's funny. It's funny you would say that. I mean, sometimes you don't realize how much you've impacted an industry, basically, I guess. That sounds a little bit more lofty than what I mean it to sound. But, just things like, like you guys calling me and being so into this story and, what I did on it and, being part of that lore. And I think it was, just, little things like there was a cover to a book and all of our names, all the artists' names were on it. It was a Spider-Man anniversary book or something, or issue.
Yeah, it's 700.
700, and it had all our names, and my name was pretty prominent on there, and I was really honored by that. It's hard not to be, means a lot, and because it validates a lifetime, it's been since 89. What is this? It's 27 years, 28 years, close to of my life into this stuff. So it's very validating to feel like, on some level, there's a bit of your stamp on things, and it's weird to have been at Marvel all this time, and DC for a couple of years, but mostly Marvel, and to be such a, have people consider me such a, sort of a Marvel mainstay at this point. If that's the right word, mainstay. I don't know what the right word would be, but it's pretty cool. It's definitely, there's some weight to it for me, for sure.
Great. Well, Ron, we want to thank you again for coming on the show with us today.
That's it. We're done. Jeez.
That's it.
What about the drinks and the shots and the?
Well, that's for later. Don't tell our audience about that.
That's the members only episode, right, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to pay to see that one, to hear that.
You call up Stan Lee and get his members only jacket, and yeah, we'll do this thing.
Stan Lee, I did a few signings with him.
That was a loaded statement.
Interesting character. But it was great doing this with you guys. Maybe we'll do it again someday.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
All right, Dan. So, how is your life force doing after that conversation? I'm
just still sucking. Like I've got the comics pressed flat against my face, and I'm just hoping, for their life to flow into me.
Dan, I mean this with all terms of endearment, but whenever we're about to talk to a creator, I always kind of prep myself in terms of not only just knowing their work, but trying to brace myself for the personality and what we're going to be getting into. And I have to say that went the most unexpected ways I think I could ever say one of our episodes with a creator went.
Well, I mean, maybe not quite as much as Robbie and his dog.
Well, that wasn't unexpected in terms of, no, you're right.
But yeah, this is another really great interview. I feel like artists are always really interesting to get on because, when you're a writer, I think you're a little more like front facing towards audiences and things like that, although perhaps artists are a little more front-facing at conventions. But, I feel like there's, all manner of variability with some of these artists in terms of their personalities and backgrounds and things like that. But most writers are, writers to the core. They have, they kind of share that kind of, similar personality. But artists could be, just about from anywhere.
As you and I can relate to, Dan.
Sure, absolutely.
And P.S., we had another artist here who never talked to the writer. Of course, the last time we had that on, we were actually the medium for the writer and the artist to talk for the first time. That was during our Superior Foes creative team interview. That
does seem to be kind of the, I guess, the standard now, weirdly enough.
Yeah. Although, again, going back to Robbie and Jason, it did seem like they had a relationship. So I guess it does depend. But it does demonstrate, though, that a book, you don't need that a good friendship like a DeFalco and Friends for a comic to still be a really good read, and those Garney and Straczynski issues prove that, I think.
Yeah, did you reread them this week?
I did, and you know, I still have some issues with the character turns in Back in Black, but I did find myself really enjoying those issues. It was a great time for the book, and then, you know, we had that one little blip, and then another great time for the book with Brand New Day. So there you have it, folks.
This one little blip that will go unnamed, right?
A four issue blip. So
there you go. Or really, maybe even only like a 2-issue blip.
That's right. I'm including other titles. My bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm also saying that, like, truly only the only really terrible issues are those pivotal last ones.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, anyway, you can find all of our new Amazing Spider Talk and old Superior Spider Talk podcasts at superiorspidertalk.com or on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play by searching Amazing Spider Talk. And maybe one of these days we'll cover this issue whose name shall not be said. But, you know, if you do look us up on any of those services, please make sure to leave us a rating and a comment to let us know how we're doing, and we'll definitely be sure to read it on the air. Also, if you have any opinions on these comics or any questions, be sure to email them us at amazingspidertalk@gmail.com. Like, if you have a creator you want us to interview, we'd love to know who you want to hear from, who we haven't interviewed yet. And, of course, you can also call us on our awesome voicemail line, 9 Red Goblin. We haven't gotten a voicemail in a while. We'd love to hear from you guys calling us at 9 Red Goblin.
Yeah, or tweet at us with OK to print hashtag, and we'll address and read those on the air too, right?
Yeah, that's always fun too. So yeah, just keep your comments coming.
Yeah, and in terms of other social media, be sure to check us both out on Facebook and subscribe to our brother podcast, The Ultimate Spin, to keep up with the adventures of Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales, who apparently are going to be kissing in the future, Dan. Stop the presses.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Okay.
You know, Dan, because I'm so grossed out by kissing.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And, you know, on that, we talked about a members club earlier, but don't forget to check out our friendly neighborhood Spider Talk members club to help support the show. It keeps us going and allows us to do interviews like the one that we did today. Mark, you know, what are we doing next week on the show? Absolutely nothing, Dan. Oh, that's exciting. No, we're going to take a week off. We're going to refuel a bit before the release of Amazing Spider-Man number 16. So, you know, take time, catch up on some episodes you might have missed, some essentials, some reviews, maybe some other creator interviews. We have that great one with Mark Guggenheim from a few weeks back. You know, do stuff with our show. Well, if people wanted to follow you, Mark, where would they find you? Well, you could find me at Chasing ASM blog on Twitter, and you can find my writings on SuperiorSpiderTalk.com, which includes some reviews and my ongoing list of Spider-Man versus other people's villains. I know it's been a little start-stop lately, guys, but the list is continuing, so stick with it. Awesome, Mark. And same goes for me, SuperiorSpiderTalk.com. And if you listen to this and aren't checking out the site, I really, you know, want to encourage you. That's really the other half of this whole thing is our site. We've got a lot of great writing on there. And, you know, I'd love to see some of our listeners joining us on the site and commenting on some of the articles. There's a great community and some great pieces from some writers that aren't Mark and myself. But there's also our stuff, too. And, of course, you can find me on Twitter at SupSpiderTalk. You know, Mark, do you remember that time that you had that family reunion in that motel with all the hookers outside? Maybe not a great location, but even worse, someone was shot by a sniper from across the street. And, you know, I was thinking the other day and reflecting on all the Uncle Ben stories you've told over the years, and I was kind of amazed that the sniper didn't actually shoot your Uncle Ben. Yeah, well, funny story about that, Dan. Oh, do tell. Well, I don't know if you knew, but Uncle Ben was actually at one point a Howling Commando with Nick Fury. No, I did not know that. Yeah, Dum Dum Dugan and, you know, the whole gang.
And
is that how he keeps coming back? He's like Dum Dum Dugan. He's like an android.
Yeah, he's an LMD. He's a life model decoy. But beyond that, he was also a trained assassin.
Oh.
And yeah, that terrifying day with the family reunion with the hookers, Uncle Ben, you know, in addition to being a former Howling Commando and a trained sniper, he really had an issue with hookers. You know, he was a moralist, you know, a little bit of a Bible thumper. Again, things we don't know about our uncles, right? So he was not happy that I dared to have such a reunion at a cheap hotel, and he started firing down upon it. And you know, after the event, I was pretty pissed off at him. I took him aside and I was like, Uncle Ben, you know, what's with killing the hookers?
You spent a lot of time putting together those pigs in a blanket.
Yeah, you know, pigs in a blanket are my specialty, Dan. You don't like. I know you're just trying to be funny, but that's actually a legitimate specialty. So you know, as I'm having this conversation with Uncle Ben, he starts clutching his chest and he falls to the ground. And he was like, "Oh God, I think this is it. You know, I'm sorry for sinning. I hope I'm forgiven. And don't forget, with great podcasts must also come amazing spider talk."